back, my friends. We are using up our last 7 bags of tomatoes that I grew for this season. I freeze all my tomatoes as I harvest them, except for the ones that we eat for fresh eating at that evening. I do that because it's really difficult to gather up enough of the tomatoes so that you can make a big batch of something. And there's a lot of work that goes into processing tomatoes, whether it be for making tomato passata, making tomato paste, all different things, salsas, all the different things. It's a lot of work. And to have to do it over and over because you're not able to harvest enough to make it worth the trouble, I'm not doing that. And so years ago, I started freezing my tomatoes so that I can make huge batches of things and process them one time for that variety of preserve that I want to make. I saved my last 7 bags for tomato paste. Now, I already made one other batch, so I had 14 bags of tomato paste. Each 7 bags that I get from the varieties I grow yield this. This is what I got. These are completely frozen. I'm about to show you the entire process there is nothing like homemade tomato paste. Just like there's nothing like homemade anything. It's special and it tastes special. It's not hard. It's time consuming, but not like you have to stand over it and hover over a pot, because I don't do that method. I do the method that is done in restaurants. It's what I know. That is my background. And to stand over a pot when you've got a million other things to do is, number one, impossible, and number two, a huge waste of time when you can have it going in your oven and doing 50,000 other things. And in restaurants, I mean, it's only a handful of people that put out all that food. So we have to be very mindful of how we use our time. And I brought that same skill set home to when I started being a stay-at-home mom and then running a homestead. So we're going to do this, and I'm going to show you how to do the entire process. It is beyond worth doing. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you at the end. So we're going to save the tomato skins, and that's what we want to do. We want to save just the tomato flesh. See how nice and neat that is? We're not leaving liquid everywhere. These have been draining for 2 days after they came out of the freezer. We want to get as little liquid in here as possible. In this case, as always, I do not separate the types of tomatoes I have. I want the depth of flavor from having multiple types of tomatoes. The best way to get that deep flavor is to have multiple types of tomatoes involved. I used to do the same. I used to get, grow Romas and things like that and just grow tons and tons and tons of one type of tomato. And of course that works, obviously. But when you're looking for really beautiful, rich flavor, the key is actually growing lots of different tomatoes, because some have bright fruity flavor, some have higher acid, some are much more sweet. So when you get all the different flavors together, the end result ends up being really fabulous and much more interesting than just a single note from, say, one type of tomato. Whoops, I missed a little skin there. We don't want to miss any. Stack your skins. I'm making a different variety of tomato powder. I showed you 2 varieties last time. I'm going to show you a third. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and fast forward through this now. Oh, let me show you one more thing. Here you see all the seeds. We're going to remove those as well. We don't want the seeds in our tomato paste. Everything is going to be gone. There's nothing going to be in there but perfect, beautiful, rich, flavored, intensely flavored tomato paste. And we're going to do that in the oven, not on the stovetop. I know it is more common to do it on the stovetop, but I find that you get a better result and less chance of scorching by doing it in the oven. You just have to come and give it a mix from time to time, like every 35 or 40 minutes, to make sure that we're not sticking, we're not scorching. And we're going to do this at a very low temperature, because the idea isn't to speed through this process. It's to intensify that flavor and eliminate the liquid, which is why we're all set up for our next step. We are going to take our well-drained, peeled tomatoes, and we're going to run them through the high-speed blender. If you don't have a high-speed blender, good grief, I imagine you can probably still do this with a regular blender, but do it in much smaller batches. You don't want to overheat the blender. We're going to run the paste or the puree, that we get from the blender through a food mill to make sure that we remove all of the seeds. So it should be fine even with a regular blender. I can't say for 100% because I don't have a regular blender. Otherwise, I would just test it and find out for sure. I don't have one. You know what? Maybe I'll order one. In the meantime, I don't have one. This is what we're going to do. Preheat your oven to 275 degrees. Here we have our tomatoes that I let drain for the final time overnight. We're going to unwrap them so I can show you how much water these tomatoes lost. Now, it's very important that you hold on to this water. It is very, very flavorful. And again, we don't want to waste something that we could get good use from. So I'm going to show you this now, and I'll show you how much water has been left behind. All right, so we get rid of that. Move the light so I can actually do my job here. Okay, let's see if we can get you closer so you can see what we're looking for. You see, this is just ready to go. All that's going to puree down is literally tomato flesh, no liquid. Okay, but then let's lift this and see how much we got from here. And this is how much tomato water we got. Now that water is full of tomato flavor. So we're going to save that in little ice, in an ice container, you know, an ice tray. And they're like little flavor bombs that we can add to soup. You can make rice, all sorts of stuff. You just need to have a little extra liquid someplace. Instead of adding water, add this. Okay. So we're all set up. You can see I've been processing. We are going to take our tomatoes that we've strained. They're peeled, and we're just going to keep adding them to our blender, pureeing them down until they are quite literally a puree. Now they still have the seeds in. The seeds will be removed when we run this mixture, this puree, through the food mill. I'm going to add a little tiny bit of the tomato water back so that it can help engage the blender. That's how much liquid we have removed, that it's having a little bit of a struggle, which is a good problem to have. Because after all, the entire purpose of making a tomato paste is to completely remove the liquid and give us a very intensely flavored liquid. Well, paste, excuse me. That's why we call it that. All right, so this is our last batch. I think I can get it all in there. Now I put a little bit of the tomato water in the bottom, so it should catch. Start it off on low. And we're done. All of our tomatoes have been pureed. We are now going to run all of our puree through a food mill. We are all set up with our food mill, and we are going to run everything from our bowl of puree through here, and the next step is our final step. So here we go. All we're doing here is removing the seeds. There is no skins. You go backwards when you feel like the blade is full. It scrapes the blade, and then you go forwards again. That's as easy as it gets. And a food mill is a really good piece of equipment to have. As you find that it's not catching as well, that's when you add more. But don't forget, you have to scrape off the bottom, because much of your perfectly beautiful, smooth, seed-free puree is underneath the strainer plate. And there we are. That is our beautiful, seed-free, skin-free puree. This started out as a pack of seeds, grew in our garden. We froze them until we had plenty so we could do all our tomato projects. This is our final bit of tomatoes for the season, and this is about to turn into tomato paste. The next step is going to be to move it to the tray that we're going to put this in the oven in, and it's going to bake in the oven uncovered at 275 degrees. We're going to give it a stir with this spatula. Why this one? This is heat proof. You don't want to use one that's meant for just scraping a bowl. This one can even work with sugar. I will link it below. It's important that you have a few heat-proof spatulas so that you don't have a catastrophe. Okay, so I'm going to get that all set up, and we'll be right back. Ordinarily, I would use a metal, not aluminum, but I would use a metal baking dish to do this. I'm using glass today because I want to be able to show you the process, and I think we'll be able to see better if I use the glass. Just as a side note of absolutely no importance, but it amuses me, I've had this exact Pyrex baking dish since I was 17 years old and moved out on my own. And this thing has been with me ever since. I am 54. I've moved more times than I care to tell you, and somehow this pan just keeps making it. I love this thing. If it ever breaks, I think I'll be devastated. So we're going to transfer our puree to our baking dish. It cannot be an aluminum dish. There would be a chemical reaction with the acid from the tomatoes. Very, very important. So you have to use stainless steel, enamel coated pan, or glass. The flavor that you would get, plus the discoloration, if you use aluminum, would be so awful. And that would be such a shame. I mean, we grew these things. We've done so much work just to have it ruined because we picked the wrong pan. So please be mindful. Now, I could use a much bigger pan. Yes, I have one. But I'd rather have it be this thick and go slow and continue to stir. What I want to make sure I avoid at all costs is scorching. I'd rather it go slow. Doing it this way will guarantee that it does. If you put it very, very thin, it will go faster. Absolutely. So if you need to go faster, you've got somewhere to be, use a bigger pan and spread it out into a thinner layer. I don't have that case. I'm not going anywhere today, so I am choosing to use this pan because I know it will. I've done it before, and I know it controls exactly how it reduces and gives me exactly what I want. More slowly, but without scorch or even risk of scorch. I can just come by and give it a stir every 45 minutes or so, no problem. So into the oven this goes. And this is after 1 hour. I'm just going to give it a quick stir, put it back in the oven. See you again in 1 hour. It's been 1 hour. I just gave it a good stir. Now what's important is you watch these edges. You see it starts to really stick there. Using your heat-proof rubber spatula, try and make sure you pull any of the goodies that are stuck on those edges. You want that. Now, what the stuff that does not come off, leave it there. Don't scrape it so hard because that stuff over the next few hours, as this reduces, is going to get a little bit bitter. It's going to kind of take on a scorch, which is what we don't want. Okay? So here we are. It smells incredible. See you at the next update. This is after hour 2. Okay, so to show you what we're dealing with here, the little bit of liquid that was left. So what we want to do is we want to turn everything over so that liquid moves to the top. We also want to make sure that we get the edges pulled away and moved into the center so that we can evaporate evenly. And then we don't smooth the top. We leave these ridges. The reason for the ridges is it gives us a place for the moisture to pool. And when the moisture pools here, it can evaporate from there. Okay, see you again in an hour. Hour 3. The color is starting to darken. There's less water sitting on top in the little crevices that we made. Starting to see some caramelization. Let's see if we zoom in here. Hour 4. Now what you're starting to see here is that it's pulling away from the sides. See that? I haven't touched it or stirred it yet. You just started to see it pull away. So very much like a cake, when a cake pulls away from the sides, it's getting very close to done. That's what we have going on here. And you start to see that caramelization. Now what we want is we want the color to start to get nice and dark. Now you see that, look how thick this is. See that? Doesn't even fall off. So, but we're not there yet. We're almost at the point where enough water has been eliminated, the tomato water, and what's going to start to happen is the paste is going to start to caramelize, and the color is going to get quite deep. And that's what we want, because what's going to happen there is the sugars, natural sugars that are in the tomatoes are going to caramelize, and the flavors are going to become very rich and very intense. We make sure we get those edges. Don't leave the edges. Very, very important. No scorching on those edges. Okay? All right, and now that's hour 4. We're going back in the oven. We are going into hour 5. We just completed hour 4. What I did here, and I'll do it again so I can show you what I mean, is I'm running the spatula all the way to the bottom of the glass. I'm doing that so that I can increase the airflow all the way to the bottom of our paste. And I'm doing that in both directions. All the liquid that we wanted to eliminate has been removed. So at this point, what we are doing is we are caramelizing and intensifying our flavor. I'm going to put this back in the oven, but now at this point, we're probably going to start to increase the speed of the caramelization process because all the liquid is gone. So I'm going to check at every 45 minutes instead of every 60 minutes. Okay, there we go. Here we are at the end of hour 5, and this is exactly what we wanted. Perfect paste. Now what we're going to do from here is I'm going to lightly sprinkle the top with just a bit of salt. Not enough that it's going to season the food you make with this. Just enough to give us a little bit of a base, and I'm going to drizzle a very small amount of olive oil over it. I'm going to let this cool, and I'll show you the next step. When I said to add just a bit of oil, this is what I mean very specifically. It's literally a tiny drizzle. I'm going to mix this in. I sprinkled over just a tiny bit of salt, literally a pinch. I'm going to stir this all together so that that olive oil is absorbed, that salt is absorbed, and then I'm going to let this come to complete room temperature. So here we are using our mechanical scoop. This is the way restaurants do it. In restaurants, we do not sit with measuring spoons or anything like that. We have a full collection of these scoops. They all have a different number on them, which signifies a different amount. That way, everything we do is always the same, because in restaurants, that's the way it has to be. You can't have measurements be flexible at all, because the way you had a dish on one day has to be the way you have the dish every single time you make it. That's the expectation. So to make sure that that's what happens, this is how we do it. And I'm just going to fill in every little blank space I have here, because I'm trying to make sure I can get this all on one tray. Whoops, there's a little bit on there, and I want every bit. We're almost there. As I said, this is a 2 tablespoon measure, because that's exactly 90% of the time what I would be looking for. If I was using one of those tubes, that's what I'd want. This paste came out so beautifully. The flavor is absolutely incredible. Excuse that sound in the background. I have a border collie, and I think he's crazy. I've never seen a dog throw a ball and catch the ball all by himself, but that is what our Henry does, and he is the most charming little creature. Henry, not now, please. So these are going to freeze completely solid, and when they have done so, we're going to take them, move them to a container that is labeled and dated, because that's very, very important. Again, see, now this one is a little short. This one, that is 1 tablespoon because it's exactly half. And that's all. I will link this because actually what I'll do is I'll link the entire collection. That way you can have these, because you'd be surprised how often you use them, whether it be for cookies or things like this. They're incredible to have. But it's very important you get the high quality ones, because if you don't, what ends up happening is this little part that's in here ends up breaking and it only goes halfway. And that will drive you out of it. It's absolutely just a miserable experience. Ask me how I know. We now have our beautiful tray of tomatoes all portioned out, and we're going to freeze it. Now, I individually quick froze it, like I told you, so they're very easy to deal with. Even when they stick together, they pull right apart. And that's the whole point. Now, what I use are recyclable zip bags. I really like these. If you don't have them, don't want to use them, whatever, these work just fine. Okay, but I am choosing to use this. I label them. I label everything. I label and date everything so that I can make sure I'm using what was in the freezer first. I use that first. And that's very, very important to make sure that you're moving things so nothing gets stuck in the back. Every bit of what's in your freezer, well, every bit of what's in my freezer, and hopefully as we work together, every bit that's in your freezer is effort and resources. And I can't imagine why we'd want to let anything get lost back there and get freezer burnt and end up being yucky. And, you know, that's not to say I'm perfect. I'm as far from perfect as anybody can get. So if I do miss something, or when I do miss something, it's rare, but it happens. Even still, I don't throw it away. I use it as feed for the critters. And because waste not, want not, 100%. So this is what we do. And every time I need tomato paste, or my husband needs tomato paste, we both cook for a living. That's what we always did until I became a stay-at-home mom. This is how we do it. And you just grab what you need. This is the most common amount, that we end up needing at home, which is, except for this one, this is the one we had that was 1 tablespoon, but the rest of them are 2. And that is most commonly what is called for in the recipes that we use. So it's very important that you freeze things in the portions that are what's needed in your family. I only have 4 people in my family. We have 2 kids and it's just us. So, and sometimes my dad visits and that takes us to 5, but that still leaves us with the correct amount we have. If you need to double your recipes or whatever it is you need to do, please do it. My way isn't the only way as far as packaging goes. It's what works for us. If you have any questions, if there's, you're trying to scale a recipe up and you're having a hard time of trying to figure out the adjustments, let me know. I'm here to help. I truly do want to. I love this stuff. And so I'm going to put this in the freezer, and I'm delighted to have the freezer space back from 7 giant bags of tomatoes all the way down to this. And these are flavor bombs, and they are incredible. Thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today. I truly enjoy and appreciate the time that you spend with me. It means the world. And if there's anything I can do to be helpful to you, please ask. I'm happy to do it. I'll see you next week. Have a great weekend.